It seems that college basketball is careening towards an era with collective bargaining agreement and salary caps. So if you were the GM, how would you divide up all the money?
You are Locked On Tar Heels, your daily podcast on the UNC Tar Heels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, it's Friday, May 17th, 2024. Welcome into the Locked On Tar Heels podcast, the only daily North Carolina show out there. I'm your host, Isaac Shade, and you're joining us at the place to get your Tar Heels content every single day. Thanks for making us your first listen or watch, and I want to send a special shout out to all you everydayers out there and all the members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community. Welcome in. This episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. It's a fun Friday episode for us today. We got a pretty neat exercise recommended by one of the great members of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community, where basically I'm playing GM of the Tar Heels and we're going to give out some dollars. So who wants to get paid? We'll see how we can budget all the salary cap. By the way, the Board of Trustees spoke a big game earlier in this week on Monday, and now they seem to be backpedaling a little bit. We're going to update you on that story coming up in just a second. So first, this idea of a salary cap. On Thursday, we were having some conversations in the Discord, and W.T. Hager 1 said this, and I've edited it a little bit. That's a weird phrase, by the way. Edited it. That's funny. Said, fun exercise that I have thought through myself a bit, but if you had a salary cap of $13 million in guaranteed NIL money, $1 million per every scholarship player, how would you divide it up among the current roster? And so look, this is a complete hypothetical. Obviously, there are not $13 million floating around, but it's an exercise and it's fun and it's interesting to think about how you would dole it out. W.T. Hager goes on to say, only conditions are that you have to pay every scholarship player a minimum salary of $100,000 and you can't play a single player more than $3 million in total. So minimum salary $100,000, maximum salary $3 million. He says that is how I would personally set up the salary cap and loose regulations to prevent bidding wars from ballooning and ensure some distribution of funds to everyone on the team. Would love to hear how you would adjust those guidelines, though. So we're basically going to run with that. I've already adjusted it a little bit and actually messaged back with W.T. Hager some to say, hey, here's what I want to do for the show. Because I think this is a super fun and honestly super potentially practical exercise that might be a real thing. I think the 13 million is a bigger number than we would or will see. But I love it for this exercise because of the nice round potential. Like, hey, it averages out to 1 million per player. So how I'm going to handle this is we are going to give out all 13 scholarships and we're going to pay everybody some level of money. We're going to start by looking back at last year's roster and what I would have done with that. I've actually already done all the money for last year, and then I just want to talk through my thought processes on it and why I made the choices I made. And then I would love to hear what you would have done different than I chose to do. So we're going to look at that. Let me pull it up. For those of you watching on YouTube, you are going to see this in real time here. And I'm sharing my screen right now. So it's up there on the screen. You can see it. For those of you listening, it's okay. Don't worry. I'm going to talk it through, or you can go back and watch on YouTube. So basically what I've done here is I went back to last year. There were 11 scholarship level players. And then I just gave out the other 2 scholarships to Creighton Lebo and to Dewey Ferris in this hypothetical scenario here. So there are 13 scholarships awarded. And here's how I chose to go about the process of breaking it up. I just automatically gave both Dewey Ferris and Creighton Lebo $100,000. That was our minimum salary. So I just thought, hey, that makes the most sense and allows me to give as much as I can to the scholarship level players while still honoring these guys and who they are and what they want to do. I next went from the bottom end to the top end, and I thought, I feel like the guys that I want to reward the most and give the highest salary to are Armando Bacot and RJ Davis. They have been at the program their whole careers. They're the cornerstones of last year's team, And I want to pay them equally because I think they are equally important to what the Tar Heels are going to do. And something else I should say about this one, we're going to go back in a little bit and look at we're going to do this upcoming year's, like a big hypothetical situation there. But in doing this one, I am actually looking back at it in retrospect. So not what I would have done heading into the year, because I want to save that thought process for the next one. I actually did this looking back on who everyone was. So with that in mind, I paid Armando Bacot after, some messing around with numbers and having to divide it up differently. I paid both Armando and RJ $1,750,000. So that's where we're at with those guys. I couldn't quite get to 2, but that's what we did. And the reason I did that is because I wanted to pay the other starters that already had college experience, meaning Harrison Ingram and Cormac Ryan, each $1.5 million. But I wanted to give Armando and RJ more than that. And so that's what I did. So RJ and Armando each got $1,750,000. Harrison and Cormac each got $1.5 million. And then after that, I went to the other starter. And I know Paxton Wojcik was starting at the beginning of the year. But again, I said, we're doing this like looking back on it. So Elliot Cadeau, I started off with him at $1.5 million too, but I needed to spread some of the other money around. So I actually cut him back to $1.3 million. Again, if you're budgeting, if you're a GM, this is some of what you got to do. So part of that for me was him being a freshman. Part of that for me was him, not getting as many minutes as the other 4 starters. And so that's what I did with that. And then from there, so we've got the 5 starters and then the 2 walk-ons. That is now 7 of our 13 scholarships. We got 6 other guys we got to pay. And that would be Zayden High, James Okonkwo, Seth Trimble, the Jaelens, and Paxson. So my next thought was, okay, after those 5 starters, there were 3 main bench guys. That's Seth and the Jaelens. My thought was, if I've paid every starter just over $1 million, I think I can get each of those guys right at $1 million because they're key players as part of the rotation. They're in all the time. So that's what I did. So Seth and both Jalen Washington and Jalen Withers, all got $1 million in this exercise, which is right at that average salary if you're looking at a $13 million budget. And so then after that, that left me with Paxton Wojcik, James Okonkwo, and Zayden High. My thought was, at that point, I had $2 million left for these 3 guys. And so my thought was, all right, Paxton Wojcik comes over from Brown. He's had this long career. He contributed in terms of minutes and leadership and production a little bit more than Zayden High. But still, Zayden High is somebody that I'm thinking a little bit ahead and thinking, I want to pay him enough to try to keep him around next year to say, hey, we believe in you and we're thankful for you. So what I did is of that remaining $2 million, I said, all right, I want to give James Okonkwo $500,000, $500,000. He's not, contributing a ton, but I want to honor him coming and being this backup guy. Because then that would leave $1.5 million to split between Zayden and Paxton. And that's exactly what I did. $750,000 each for those 2 guys, which equaled out to exactly $13 million. So again, this is not a perfect exercise. And you could argue that because Paxton Wojcik had a bigger role on the team, he might deserve a little more than Zayden High. So maybe you could switch it to 800 and 700,000 respectively. I'm not going to quibble with any of that. This is just where I landed and how I went through the thought process of giving each of these guys a salary in a salary cap idea. So that was what I did for the 23-24 team. Again, would love to hear your thoughts. I'd love for you to go through this exercise and see where you land. Are you similar to me, different than me, different thought process? Man, I want to know all of that. So that's the 23-24 roster. Coming up in just a second, what I want to do is forecast ahead to the 24-25 roster, which has 10 scholarships out right now, 3 remaining. What do you do and how do you pay everybody? We're going to get to that in just a second. Right after I tell you about Game Time, I'm stoked for the NBA playoffs going on right now. Wouldn't it be cool? Go to a game just on a whim, like, hey, let's go to an NBA game. Well, good news. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of the NBA, which makes getting playoff tickets even faster and easier. Prices on the Game Time app, they actually drop the closer you get to tip-off. They've got killer last-minute deals, all-in prices, views from your seat, and a lowest price guarantee. Game Time takes the guesswork out of buying NBA tickets. So I'm looking around, I'm like, hey, Thunder, Mavs, that's all pretty close to me. I could go do that. I often worry, though, about third-party tickets being bogus. I'm going to show up and they're going to turn me away. But with Game Time ticket coverage, your purchase is covered by the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. I love that peace of mind. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Terms apply. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices, guaranteed. All right, we just went through the exercise of breaking out a salary cap of $13 million to the 23-24 roster. Now, what I want to do in real time together is go through the process of doing it for next year's roster. You and me together in real time right now. How fun is this going to be? If you want to join me, and again, you're not tainted by my numbers yet, so why don't you pause it and do what you want to do for this? What we're going to do is start by looking at, there's 10 scholarships given, plus right now 3 available. So what I'm going to do is, what happens if you give of the remaining 3 to 1 transfer and 2 walk-ons? Or then after that, we're going to look at it in the other way. What if you get 2 transfers and give the third to a walk-on? So if you want to stop and do your own version of this exercise and then come back and see if we did it the same, would love to see it. So for those of you watching, obviously I'm going to be doing this in real time on screen in front of you. For those who are listening, just follow along. I'm going to talk it through just like I did, or maybe you want to go back in YouTube and watch. So some of why I liked going ahead and showing you what I would have done for last year's is because it helps inform what we do this year. So for example, let me click back over to last year where RJ got $1,750,000. My thought right out of the gate was basically, I want to say, RJ Davis, you came back to North Carolina and we're going to reward the heck out of you with $2 million. Now, obviously, that might sound massive to you, but keep in mind, in this hypothetical, we've got an average of $1 million per player to work with. So that's pretty easy. Now, the second place I want to go to is the same place we started last time. We've got 2 walk-ons in this scenario. So same as the other one, I'm going to give them each $100,000 in their salary. I love to be able to reward them, and how neat is that? So right now, we've spent $2.2 million. We've got $10.8 million left to spend around. So similar, the way we went last time was we went to the other starters and we said, all right, I wanted to pay the starters $1.5 million. So last year I paid Elliot Cadeau $1.3. We're going to up that this year and get him up to that $1.5 million mark, just like we did with the other starters last year, right? So Elliot Cadeau from $1.3 million up to $1.5 million. Love to see that. Love to honor that. That's exactly what we're going to do there. And then you start thinking about these other guys. Cade Tyson comes in. I project him to be a starter. I'm going to give him $1,500,000 as well. And so then that gets, we're starting to get up in money there, but you want to reward these guys that are coming in. You look at it and you say, all right, in this scenario, Carolina's getting 1 transfer. I'm assuming in this scenario that transfer is a starter. So it's another $1,500,000, $1.5 million. And then you start to look around and it's like, oh man, that money's starting to get out there. Well, that's a lot. And so then you look at it and you say, okay, we've awarded 4 starter level sets of money. And then you look at it and you think, well, the next starters are probably, in this scenario, depending on who that transfer is, maybe Jalen Washington is one of your starters. And so let's bump J Wash from 1 million up to 1.2. How about that? That sounds good to me. And then Seth Trimble. He's going to be that next critical guy, but I want to honor and reward him for coming back to school. He probably wouldn't be starting, so let's give him just, a little bit less than what we just gave to J Wash. So I'm going to give him $1,150,000. There you go. Nice. That's for you, Seth Trimble. Jay Witt comes back to school. I'd love to give him more, but I think going to be ultimately the same role. So we're just going to stick right at $1 million with Jalen Withers. So that gives us, we have James Brown left, Zayden High, Ian Jackson, Drake Powell. So the 3 incoming freshmen in Zayden High, we've paid 9 of the 13 scholarships, and we've got left to spend just under $3 million on these 4 guys. So not too bad. As you look at those 4, to me, the guy that's going to have the biggest impact of them is Ian Jackson. I'd love to get him to $1 million. I don't know that we're going to get there with what we got left. So let's try it, and then we'll adjust if we need to. So there's $1 million to Ian Jackson. Drake Powell, you might recall last year we gave $750 to Zayden High. I think we're going to be around that number for Drake. So let's try that again. I think he will play more Drake Powell and have a bigger role than Zayden did. But with the money we've already committed to others, we're kind of behind a rock and a hard place there. So let's give Drake $750,000. That's what I'm thinking. In terms of Zayden, I do want to bump him a little bit from where he was at that $750,000. So let's give him $800,000. I think he's going to have a bigger role this year. And then that leaves $400,000 for James Brown. Now, that's the lowest we've given a scholarship player. Remember last year we did $500,000 in our scenario for James Okonkwo. So if we wanted to, maybe we could bump Ian Jackson down to $900,000, and that gives us that extra $100,000 to bump James Brown up to $500,000. You could play with that, go a little bit around, but that leaves us right at $13 million. And as I look back at this, I might tweak a few things, but I feel pretty good with where we're at with it. But you see how difficult this is to wrestle with these decisions. What's a player worth? What's a player worth contextually versus the market? Like, all of that is a real thing. But here's what's tricky. In this scenario, remember, we filled those 3 remaining scholarships with 2 walk-ons and 1 transfer. What happens if we change this to where it's 2 transfers and 1 walk-on? Because you're not paying that transfer just $100,000, and that puts you in a much more difficult spot. So let's say the transfer is another starter level guy. Here's probably what I would do is take the other transfer, bump it down to 1.25, like $1,250,000. I would do the same with this other transfer, assuming these are both starting level guys. Now, we don't know if that would be enough, but in this scenario, just, go with me, whatever. I don't want to move off of RJ at $2 million. So we're going to lock that in. I'm going to bold it. I'm going to bold the transfer or the walk on at 100,000 and these 2 transfers at 1.25 mil. So I think what we've got to do then, because now we are $900,000 over budget, and that's difficult to resonate with. Elliot Cadeau, we're going to keep him at 1.5. James Brown, we're going to keep him at 500. Zayden, let's keep him at 800. Again, we want to give him a bonus for sticking around, being part of things this year. Let's keep Ian at 900,000. I don't want to bring him down at all. I don't think that would be fair. Same with Drake Powell. Let's keep him because he's going to be a critical cog in the rotation. So then what you start looking at is you got to drop 900,000 out of this, and that comes out of Jalen Withers, Jalen Washington, Cade Tyson, and Seth Trimble. All guys who are going to be key rotation pieces. And you see how just tricky this gets to navigate. Jalen Withers, I'm not bumping him down from $1 million because that's what he got last year. I'm not going to cut his pay. No, absolutely not. But the other thing we could do is if both of these transfers in this scenario are starter level, how about Jae'lyn? Let's cut him back to $1 million, not give him a raise, since in this scenario, he would not be a starter level. So $1 million, we're going to keep paying him the same. Now we're down to $700,000 over budget. We've got Cade at $1.5 million. Here's what I think we're going to have to do is cut him back to $1 million even. Oops, I'm typing in the wrong spot there. There we go. Cade, you're going to get $1 million even. I think that might be fair in this scenario and what we've done. He's transferring up, all those kind of things from Belmont, but we're still $200,000 over budget. Right now, Seth Trimble is at $1,150,000. I think we got to take Seth back to $1 million, just like he got last year, which in this scenario is commensurate with what both Jay Wash and Jay Witt got. Problem is we're now still 50,000 over budget. So here's what I'm going to do is cut Zayden High back to the 750 that he got last year. And now we're even at 13 million. So folks, you see, this is a crazy difficult thing to think about and process and deal with. again, the 13 million is just a random number that we're using, but you got to figure out how to work with it, roll with it. And if you're the GM, man, that's very difficult. And so if we do get to this point, which I think we're going to get to in college athletics with the collective bargaining agreement, unionization, we've already heard some about that from other, I forget was it Brown? Can't remember off the top of my head. And salary caps and things like that. This is the real world of what we're going to have to mess with. So I just thought this was a super fun exercise to mess with. So big thanks to W.T. Hager for this great idea. And again, I want to see what you all do with the money. How do you balance it? How do you make it all work and come together? Well, earlier this week, the Carolina Board of Trustees was talking a pretty big game, right? You remember this? Well, they spoke with a heavy fist earlier this week, but now they're backpedaling a little bit. More on that coming up in just a second. Right after I tell you about FanDuel, it's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL. And FanDuel is giving you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Again, that's $150 to spend on spreads, money lines, props, and so much more. Why don't you go check out the national championship odds for next year for college basketball? Carolina's right up there in the mix, but they might be a little bit too low, and maybe you want to get in on that, or other teams that you think are too low and are at a great value. If you want to do that, visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Earlier this week, the Carolina Board of Trustees spoke with a pretty heavy fist about auditing the athletics budget in a closed-door meeting coming up on Thursday. Yesterday, Bubba Cunningham, as you remember we talked about, is off at the ACC spring meetings down in Florida, but he was coming back up to be part of this. It was a whole big thing, and like, what is happening? Are we worried about Bubba Cunningham's job? I didn't think, because I was like, y'all, Bubba Cunningham is doing a phenomenal job guiding this athletics department. What are we even talking about here? Well, a couple things, interesting updates that lead me to believe that the Board of Trustees got out over their proverbial skis, if you'll allow me that, a little bit. And now it seems from some information that came out on Thursday, they're trying to put that toothpaste back in the tube. A couple different sources I want to quote here. David Hale on Twitter on Wednesday, actually, so before these meetings happened, said, so quick date on UNC. AD Bubba Cunningham left spring meetings early to shore up support, meaning like, rally the troops, basically. The budget deficits the Board of Trustees is upset with were, and this is exactly what I said, I speculated about on the show earlier this week, were remnants from COVID and the department's decision not to cut or mothball sports. It's been a part of future budgets for years, but was told board members, quote, have questions they haven't gotten answers to, end quote, and the audit is simply fiduciary due diligence. There will be a Board of Trustees meeting tomorrow where Cunningham will need to address budget concerns, but I'm told by multiple sources close to the board that Cunningham is not expected to be fired. Several sources I spoke to expressed surprise the topic of a lawsuit to exit the ACC was brought up, and there is not widespread support on the board to go that route right now. Any lawsuit would also require approval of university system governors. We talked about that. And the last one, Jim Phillips called lawsuit talk, quote, campus politics, and said he has heard nothing from UNC about a potential exit. So this is what I said earlier in the week. Look, Carolina, and I love this under Bubba Cunningham's leadership, is firmly committed to all 28 of their varsity sports. They did so through COVID, and they've continued to do so. And this is part of why I've continually said I think that Carolina is a better candidate for Big Ten if they leave the ACC, because the SEC doesn't support all those sports. However, there are deficits that have come with that. And so I understand the board's questions about this, and they should, right? But I saw somewhere else, and forgive me, I forget where I saw this, but something in the range of over the past 5 years, there have been 10 audits of the athletic department's budget. I mean, it's like we've been doing this, right? And so that's where it is. I mean, even the fact that it says told the board that Cunningham is not expected to be fired. I mean, I didn't even think we were close to that. So the fact we're talking about that is pretty bonkers to me as well. Also, that idea that the lawsuit would require approval of university system governors continues to lead to me thinking that Carolina is just going to wait to see what happens with the Florida State and the Clemson lawsuits that are pending right now. Now, here's where it gets interesting and where the backpedaling starts to take place from the board. On Thursday, Brian Murphy, who's been the one covering this and doing a phenomenal job, I might add, in an article on Thursday, said that on Monday, the trustees, remember, said, as we've been talking, said they were going to discuss the athletics budget in a closed, keyword closed meeting on Thursday. But on Thursday, they ended up about facing. Why? Well, here's what Murphy discussed in his article. There was a complaint filed in court on Wednesday alleging that the quote, the board was in violation of the state's Open Meetings and Public Records Act, quote. So there was a restraining order TRO put in place. And so basically that didn't happen. And so then the trustees come out with a statement, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I do want to say one very clear statement that's told me everything I needed to hear. Chairman John Pryor read a statement aimed at, quote, correcting and clarifying their intent, meaning we said these things and we meant them at the time, but we got called out on it. And so we want to say what we actually said instead, whatever. You're with me. So part of the quote from the Board of Trustees says this, quote, we did not speak with the precision or clarity that we should have on Monday, end quote. That's all you need to know. Here's what that means. This was high school hallway gossip that was going on, that they just, like mob mentality, they started talking a bigger game and got into it. And now I think they're realizing, oh, this went places we didn't intend it to. So now we need to try to get it all back in. They got caught up in something bigger than I think they thought. And I get it. I understand at a bigger level, the board's position that the ground, the collegiate athletics ground we're on right now is very rocky, very uncertain, and they want to make sure that Carolina is in a great place. And I'm very thankful for that. And I think everyone surrounding Carolina is thankful for that. Both those on the inside, those in administration, and those on the outside who are just fans of Carolina. They just want to keep knowing that the board and everyone else involved has the Tar Heels' best interest at heart. And I think where they just got away from it, or at least what it sounded like they were saying, was that Bubba was the aim of that issue. And I don't think that he is. I think the context that we're in is the bigger issue, and that Bubba Cunningham, quite frankly, for my opinion, is doing a great job navigating that about as well as you can do in any circumstance similar to this. So in Murphy's reporting, he said that as things did go to a closed session on Thursday, eventually Bubba left the meetings. It sounds like there weren't even any budget questions that he actually answered. And so more to come on this story for sure. But here's what's critical to me. Interim Chancellor Lee Roberts seems to have issued basically a vote of approval in Bubba Cunningham's favor. And that makes me very happy. And I think it would you too. As we get ready to get out of here, quick weekend whip around. Hopefully you caught Thursday's episode with Carolina baseball player Johnny Castagnazzi, but reminder that Carolina is wrapping up the regular season this weekend at Duke. They played last night. I'm recording this before Thursday's game finishes, but as you listen to or watch this on Friday, you already know the result. They will play again tonight and again on Saturday. Remember, if they won last night, or if Clemson loses, then Carolina is the overall number 1 seed in the ACC tournament next week. Literally, just the magic numbers 1 for those who know baseball lingo with magic numbers. Just one Carolina win or one Clemson loss, Tar Heels are that 1 seed for the ACC tournament next week. But they're playing for more than that, right? Playing for regional seeding, playing for overall national seeding, where you want to be one of those top 8 regional seeds. That way you can host both the regional, and if you win, host the super regional as well. So that's what we're watching for. Let's go out and get it done against Duke. Also, women's golf starts the national championships today, Friday, May 17th, day 1 of stroke play. There's 4 days of stroke play. After that, I believe it's the top 8 go on, because the quarterfinals and semifinals both take place in match play on Tuesday, with the championship on Friday, just one head-to-head, on Wednesday, just one head-to-head match. So best of luck to the ladies as they take off today, facing off, and that'll be in Carlsbad, California, and then the men's follow up later on after that. And so best of luck to both golf teams. All right, gang, it's been another great week here on the show. Thanks so much for being with us. Bunch of great conversations, bunch of great guests this week. Again, I'd love to see your salary cap numbers and what you would have done with this thing. A super fun exercise. Thanks again, W.T. Hager. Really appreciate you. If you haven't already subscribed to the show, please do that. It's simple and easy to do on both audio and video. If you're not part of the Locked On Tar Heels Discord community, we'd love to have you in there. It's free to join, and the link is in the show notes. Come on in. Come for the Tar Heels, stay for the community. All right. It's always a great day to be a Tar Heel. We'll talk again on Monday. But until then, peace.